A waitress helps sick mother of billionaire turns her life around with a simple gesture. What if a simple gesture of kindness could change the course of your life and someone else's? Mel's diner sat on the frayed edge of the city, a forgotten relic where the air smelled of stale coffee, fried onions, and dreams long abandoned. Catherine Miller, 28, navigated its sticky checkered floors with the quiet resilience of someone who'd learned to carry the world without breaking. Her auburn hair was swept into a messy bun, loose strands framing a face that held both weariness and a stubborn spark of hope. Her hazel eyes, though shadowed by fatigue, lit up when she bantered with the regular struckers, insomniacs, and drifters who found solace in the diner's dim glow. Catherine's life was a tightrope walk over a chasm of debt and duty. Her younger sister Emily, 16, was her hearted dreamer, with a sketchbook full of comic book heroes and a smile that made the world feel less heavy. Their mother, Sarah, had died 5 years ago after a brutal fight with breast cancer, leaving Catherine to raise Emily in a one-bedroom apartment where the radiator clanked and the landlord's knocks grew louder each month. Bills stacked up like a cruel game: rent, utilities, Emily's art supplies, medical debts from Sarah's final days. Catherine worked double shifts at the diner and cleaned houses on weekends, her body aching, her dreams of studying art buried under the grind. "Cat, you're going to burn out," Mara, her co-worker, warned, flicking ash from her cigarette during a smoke break. Mara, a tough-talking mother of 3, had seen too many girls like Catherine fade under the city's weight. "I'm fine," Catherine said, her voice soft but steely. She couldn't afford to be anything else. That night, the diner was a tomb, the rain driving away all but the most desperate. Catherine was scrubbing the counter, her hands raw from bleach when the bell above the door chimed. A man stepped in, his will coat dripping, his presence jarring against the diner's worn edges. He was tall, mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair, and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. But his dark eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped like a man carrying a grief-to-vast name. He slid onto a stool at the counter, staring at the chip from Micah as if it held answers. Catherine hesitated. Something about him felt raw, not threatening, but fragile, like a vase one tap from shattering. She poured a cup of shamam meal tear, mother's old trick for soothing frayed nerves, and set it before him. "On the house," she said, her voice warm. "Rainy nights call for something hot." The man glanced up, startled as if he'd forgotten he wasn't alone. "Thanks," he mumbled, his voice rough like gravel underfoot. He didn't touch the tea. Catherine returned to her tasks, but her gaze kept drifting to him. She knew that look, the kind that came when life had stripped you bare. She'd seen it in the mirror too many times. Catherine Miller was a paradox woman who gave endlessly while having nothing. Growing up, she'd been the glue holding her family together, soothing her mother's fears during chemo, making Emily giggle with silly drawings when the hospital bills arrived. Her empathy was a gift, but it came at a cost. She hadn't picked up a paintbrush in years, hadn't let herself dream of art school or a life beyond survival. Her rare moments of joy were stolen. Sketching superheroes on diner napkins, reading Emily's poetry, or dancing with her sister to crackly radio tunes in their cramped kitchen. She told herself it was enough, but at night when Emily slept, Catherine's heart ached for the life she'd shelved. The man at the counter was Richard Hawthorne, though Catherine didn't know his name. At 45, he was a tech titan, his company's software powering everything from smartphones to satellites. He'd built his empire from a childhood of scraped knees and empty cupboards, a kid from the projects who'd outsmarted the world. But success was a cold companion. His mother, Evelyn, 68, was his only family, the woman who'd worked 3 jobs to keep him fed. Hood cheered at his high school graduation when no one else showed. Now she was slipping away, her body ravaged by a rare neurodegenerative disease called corticobal degeneration. Specialists, clinical trials, private jets to European clinics. Richard had tried it all. Nothing worked. The doctors gave her months, maybe weeks. Richard hadn't slept in days, hadn't eaten anything but hospital cafeteria sandwiches. The diner was a random escape, a place to hide from the beep of monitors and the sterile smell of Evelyn's room. He felt like a failure, his billions useless against the one fight that mattered. Catherine didn't mean to talk to him. She had tables to wipe, a shift to survive. But as she passed, she saw his hands tremble, his jaw clench. Against her better judgment, she leaned against the counter. "Rough night?" she asked, her tone light, but laced with understanding. Richard's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as if braced for pity, but Catherine's face held only quiet compassion. No judgment. He exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You could say that," he said, his voice low. She nodded, tracing a scratch on the counter with her finger. "My mom used to say rain makes everything heavier, but it always clears." She paused, then added, "Sometimes talking lightens the load." Richard didn't know why he answered. Maybe it was her voice, steady yet kind. Maybe it was the tea, its steamed curling like a small act of care. "My mother's dying," he said, the words spilling out. Ron jagged, and I can't stop it. Catherine's breath caught. She knew that pain, the helplessness, the guilt that gnawed like a parasite. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice thick. "My mom, cancer took her 5 years ago. I used to think if I just fought harder, I could have saved her, but you can't carry that. You just hold tight to the time you have." Richard stared at her, her words slicing through the fog in his mind. No one had spoken to him like that. Not his executives, not his paid counselors. "How do you do it?" he asked, his voice cracking. "How do you keep going when it's all falling apart?" Catherine gave a small sad smile. "You don't have a choice. You love them, so you keep moving, one foot in front of the other." They talked until the rain softened to a drizzle, the diner empty except for Mara's occasional cough from the kitchen. Catherine shared stories of her mother, her off-key singing, her obsession with lavender soap, the way she'd braid Catherine's hair, even when her hands shook from chemo. Richard opened up about Elin, her sharp tongue, her pride in his first computer built from scavenged hearts. Her fear of being a burden now. For the first time in weeks, he felt the weight lift, if only a little, when he left. He slid a $100 bill under the teacup, far more than the menu's priciest item. Catherine tried to protest, but he was already out the door, the bell chiming in his wake. Richard returned the next night. Then the next, the diner became his sanctuary. Catherine, his unexpected anchor. She didn't know he was a billionaire, didn't care. To her, he was just Richard, a man drowning in grief. To him, she was a miracle. Her empathy, a rare currency in his world of contracts and power plays. Their conversations deepened. Catherine told him about Emily's comic book dreams, about the apartment's leaky roof, about the art she'd loved but abandoned. Richard shared his fears of losing Evelyn, of facing a future alone, of wondering if his life's work meant anything. He admired Catherine's resilience, her ability to find light in the darkest corners. One night he noticed her limp slightly as she carried a tray, her face pale under the diner's fluorescent lights. "You okay?" he asked, concern sharpening his voice. "Just tired," she said, brushing it off with a smile. But Richard saw the truth. She was fraying, her body and spirit stretched. Then he didn't press, but the sight of her exhaustion planted a seed. 10 days later, Richard arrived before Catherine's shift started, his face set with determination. He waited until the diner cleared, then spoke, his voice low but urgent. "I need your help. Catherine, my mother, it's not just her body. She's losing herself, her spirit. I've got nurses, doctors, the best money can buy, but she needs someone who sees her, someone like you." Catherine froze, her rag mid-wipe on the counter. "Me? I'm not trained for that. I'm just a waitress." "You're more than that," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You understand what it's like to love someone who's slipping away. I'll pay you enough to change things for you, for your sister. Just help me take care of her." Please, Catherine's mind spun. The money could clear their debts, give Emily a shot at college, maybe even let Catherine breathe for the first time in years. But it meant stepping into a stranger's world, leaving the diner's familiar chaos. Putting her own dreams on hold again, she thought of Emily, of the sketchbook her sister carried everywhere. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That night, she sat on their sagging couch. Emily curled beside her, sketching a superhero with wings. "You should do it, Kat," Emily said, her voice firm. You're always saving everyone else. Maybe this is your chance. Catherine took the job. Evelyn Hawthorne's penthouse was a universe away from Mel's diner marble floors, crystal chandeliers, windows framing the city's glittering skyline. Elin herself was a force. Even as her body betrayed her, her silver hair was pinned neatly, her blue eyes piercing despite the tremors that shook her hands. She studied Catherine like a hawk. You're not one of Richard's usual hires, she said, her voice dry as autumn leaves. Good, I'm sick of polished puppets. Catherine laughed, disarmed. I'm just here to help Mrs. Hawthorne. Evelyn, she corrected, and don't cuddle me. I've got enough of that from the nurses. Their days found a rhythm. Catherine helped Evelyn eat, dress, or move to the balcony to watch the city's pulse. But mostly she listened. Elin spun tales of her youth dancing in dive bars, raising Richard in a tenement with peeling paint, dreaming of a stage career she never pursued. Catherine shared her own stories of painting murals on her bedroom walls, of Emily's comic book heroes, of Sarah's laughter. They bonded over their shared defiance, their refusal to let life crush them entirely. Richard watched, a ruck. Catherine brought warmth to the penthouse, a lightness he hadn't seen since his childhood. Evelyn smiled more, her wit sharper in Catherine's company, but he also saw Catherine strain her late nights poring over community college flyers, her quiet winces when she thought no one noticed. He learned from a nurse that Catherine had been skipping meals to save money, that her blood pressure was spiking from stress. The realization hit him like a punch. She was killing herself to keep others alive. One evening, Richard found Catherine in the penthouse's kitchen, sketching on a scrap of paper. The drawing was of Evelyn, her face radiant despite the lines of illness. You're talented, he said, genuinely surprised. Catherine flushed, crumpling the paper. It's nothing, just doodling. It's not nothing, he said, his voice firm. He hesitated, then plunged ahead. I want to offer you something more. Not just this job. My company runs a foundation arts programs, education, grants. You could work there, go to school, pursue your art. I'll cover it all. Tuition, everything. Catherine's heart raced. It was her dream handed to her on a silver platter art school, a career, a life beyond survival. But it meant leaving Evelyn, stepping away from the caregiving job stability, risking everything on a future she'd never dared imagine. She'd spent her life choosing duty over desire. Could she really choose herself now? I need time, she said, her voice trembling. That night, she walked home through the rain, her sneakers soaking through. She passed a mural she'd painted years ago, now faded, but still vibrant. A girl with wings soaring over the city. It felt like a message from her younger self, a reminder of who she'd been before life ground her down. Evelyn's health plummeted. That week her tremors worsened, her speech slurred, her moments of clarity fleeting. Richard was unraveling, barking at nurses, retreating into his office to stare at financial reports he didn't read. Catherine stayed steady, reading Evelyn's favorite poems, brushing her hair, keeping the darkness at bay. One night Evelyn woke lucid, her hand gripping Catherine's. You're good for him, she whispered, her voice faint but fierce for both of us. Don't let him shut you out when I'm gone. Catherine's throat tightened. I won't, she promised, tears burning her eyes. The next morning, Elin slipped into a coma. Richard stood by her bedside, his face a mask of despair, his hands clenched as if he could fight death itself. Catherine found him there alone in the sterile room. She didn't speak, just took his hand, her touch a lifeline. She knows you love her, she said softly. She's proud of you, Richard. She always was. Richard's composure cracked, sobs tearing through him. Catherine held him, her own tears falling. In that moment, she saw her own strength, not just in surviving, but in lifting others through their pain. Evelyn passed away that night, her breathing slowing until the room was silent. The penthouse felt hollow, the city's lights dim beyond the windows. Richard was adrift, unable to face the funeral plans, the boardroom, the future. Catherine took charge, organizing the memorial, calling Evelyn's old friends, keeping Richard tethered to the world that the memorial was small, held in a chapel overlooking the city. Evelyn's photo, a candid shot of her laughing. Her hair wild, stood on a table surrounded by white leaves. Catherine placed a framed sketch beside at the drawing of Evelyn, radiant and fierce. She turned to Richard, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I told Evelyn I was proud of her strength, and I promised her you wouldn't face this alone. I'm keeping that promise. Richard looked at her, his eyes searching hers, her words, her simple act of framing a memory, cut through his grief like sunlight through storm clouds. He saw her clearly not just as a caregiver, but as a woman who had given him and Evelyn something no money could buy. Love that asked for nothing in return. In that moment, he understood what mattered. Connection, purpose, the courage to live fully in each fleeting day. In the weeks that followed, Richard threw himself into honoring Evelyn's legacy. He launched the Evelyn Hawthorne Foundation, an arts and education initiative for those in underserved communities, with Catherine as its first beneficiary. He funded her enrollment in a prestigious fine arts program, not as charity, but as a recognition of her talent. But he also saw her gift for counseling, her ability to guide people through pain. And he connected her with mentors to blend her art with therapy, a path to heal others as she'd healed him. Catherine hesitated, fear of failure whispering, doubts, but Emily's words echoed. You're enough, Kat. She accepted, moving Emily into a new apartment with a skylight for her sister's art. She began classes. Her first day stepping into a studio where the smell of paint felt like coming home. She painted a mural of a city skyline, wings soaring, a mother's laughter woven into the stars. It was for Evelyn, for herself, for every moment she'd fought for. Richard and Catherine's bond deepened, not into romance, but into a profound friendship, a partnership built on shared loss and mutual respect. He learned to live again, finding his own purpose in the foundation's work. Mentoring kids like the one he'd been, she learned to dream without guilt, trusting she deserved it. A year later, Mel's diner stood unchanged, its neon sign still flickering. Catherine stopped by often, bringing Emily for milkshakes, sketching with Mara's kids. Big-time artist now, huh? Mara teased, grinning. Still just a waitress at heart, Catherine said, leaving a napkin with a doodless superhero with Evelyn's sharp eyes. A thank you to the diner that had sparked her journey. Across the city, Richard stood in the Foundation's new community center, its walls lined with murals from young artists like Emily. He held a photo of Evelyn, her smile mirrored in the faces around him. You're proud, he whispered. Catherine's words a balm that never faded. Dot at the center's opening ceremony. Catherine unveiled her muralist city bathed in rain, figures rising with wings of light. Evelyn, Sarah Evelyn herself, Richard connected by threads of gold. The crowd gasped, their applause mingling with the soft patter of rain outside. Emily squeezed her hand. Richard nodded, his eyes shining Dot as the rain fell. Catherine felt her mother's laughter, Evelyn's strength, her own heart beating strong. The city's pulse, cinched with hers a promise, kept a life reborn. And somewhere in the quiet spaces, two women's voices sang soft and clear, carried by love that outlasted the storms.